Hey everybody, just Mr. Karam here, coming at you with day 4 of our Elements of Music talk, and we're diving right in. So here we go. Elements of Music. Like I've been saying, you need to have watched or experienced, and maybe live, one way or another, all 4 lectures of this Elements of Music series, as there is a quiz at the end of all this. So we start out in the specific order we start out in because each one builds on another. So the first day we talked about rhythm, and we talked about within rhythm, we talked about tempo, we talked about meter, and we talked about note duration. Okay, three kind of subcategories of rhythm. So I'm not going to talk about them again. You need to watch that video if you haven't already. Then day 2, we talked about pitch. We talked about its definition. We talked about high lows, intervals versus chords, melody and harmony. We talked about the grand staff. I showed you what it looked like. We watched a video. Pretty cool stuff. The next one we talked about was structure and form, which is, well, you watch the video to find out. Then we talked about some examples of structure and form, 3 specific examples in what do we talk about? Strophic, binary form, and verse chorus. Today, we're talking about instrumentation. So instrumentation, simply put, is the combination of instruments, how we combine instruments how we combine instruments in a composition. Okay. 2 categories within instrumentation, kind of 2 subcategories. We have texture and we have timbre. So, and yes, you might be saying, well, oh, he spelled that wrong, or oh, he said that wrong. I did not. I said that correctly and I spelled that correctly. So timbre would be spelled Timbre, but pronounced timbre. Okay. I know it's strange, but so a lot, you have to recognize that a lot of musical terms are not English. So we just have to adapt to that, right? So also for our purposes today and our purposes in music making and our purposes just in the world, the voice is an instrument, all right? There is a mechanics behind the voice. There is a science behind the voice. The voice is not just an instrument. The voice is the original instrument. So if someone's like, the voice isn't an instrument, yo, sure it is. Absolutely it is, especially in our context here in a music class. So the first thing we're going to talk about now is texture. That's one of our 2 subcategories. Now, texture is the instruments, and I put and or voices, right? But knowing that the voice is an instrument sounding at one time. So sounding is making sound. That's the definition of sounding. So instruments sounding at once. Now, we kind of look at texture as like a thickness. If there's one instrument playing, maybe a melody, that's a somewhat thinner texture. If there are a ton of instruments playing in multiple octaves and all of this stuff, that will be a thicker texture. So a solo singer with just an acoustic guitar is a thinner texture than a symphony of 88 musicians, right? So that's just texture. We tend to measure it with thickness and sort of density. So there are 2 types of textures, I guess, and that is rhythmic texture and harmonic texture. So rhythmic texture comprises of terms like homorhythmic, or well, we pronounce it in the music world, homorhythmic, and polyrhythmic. So homo is the prefix for the same, right? And rhythmic is rhythm. So homorhythmic would be the same rhythm. Poly is the prefix for many or multiple. So many rhythms or multiple rhythms. Okay. Harmonic texture follows a similar pattern. So harmonic, of course, we're talking about harmonies. We just talked about harmonies in day 2 and how harmonies have to be multiple pitches sounding at the same time. So monophonic, mono is a prefix for one, which means one sound. Phonic is a suffix for sound. So monophonic is one sound. Polyphonic, going along what we just talked about, polyphonic is multiple sounds occurring at the same time. So we'll look at some examples of those things today. And again, if you need a second to pause and take notes, totally cool. You can do that now. But moving on. Maybe. Here is an example of homorhythmic texture, where we have all the voices moving in the same rhythm, right? Same rhythm, homorhythmic. So we have over here, or most of the voices, because we do have a drone or a pedal tone that is not really, I guess, as a part of the homophonic or homorhythmic texture as we might suspect. But other than that, we've got all these voices that are moving in the same exact rhythm, and they're creating harmony exactly together. Homorhythmic. Okay, next is polyrhythmic. And polyrhythmic, of course, we just talked about, meant multiple or many rhythms. And so here we have an example of just one measure of, it looks like 3 different rhythms going on in one measure in all the different voices. So we have triplets here, sextuplets there, quarter notes there. Like pretty, I guess, thicker texture, rhythmically speaking. So polyrhythmic, many rhythms. Next thing we'll do, let me preface this a second. We're going to listen to an example of texture. Now, this texture is, it's Simple Gifts. I'll be honest with you. It's a piece that we've been using a lot during these presentations, but that's good. Its job is to show you, expose you to the melody, and then you're able to decipher the various concepts out of the examples. So this example plays the melody, and then it plays different rhythms in sort of a polyrhythm, right? So some more supporting tones. Then it busts into more of a polyrhythmic example where they're playing the same kind of, polyphonic. Then it busts into a polyphonic sort of section where it plays the melody, but then the other parts are playing a similar thing around that melody. So let's take a look. It's pretty quick. It's a recorder example. So it's not, let me rewind all the way back. So it's not the prettiest of things. Some of you might remember. Some of you might remember the recorder from, I believe, probably 4th grade. So the top is recorder 1, then recorder 2 in the middle, recorder 3 in the bottom. They're playing the same instrument. So if we're talking timbre, they're all the same timbre because they're the same instrument. But you don't know that. We haven't gotten there yet. Darn. I got ahead of myself. Now we have a little bit more of a polyphonic thing going on. Polyrhythmic of sorts too. Because we have multiple rhythms, multiple things going on, multiple melodies and counter melodies. Homorhythmic right there in that measure. Cool. So that gave you an example of how when parts move at different times, how it can create both rhythmic and harmonic textures. Really important there. Moving on. Next is timbre. I let myself slip a little bit, got ahead of myself in that last video. But timbre, yes, I'm pronouncing it correctly and I spelled it correctly. Timbre. It is the distinctive sound of an instrument. The distinctive sound of an instrument. We will also call that tone color. or sometimes just tone. Okay. Now, we tend to break down timbre into instrument families. Of course, we have families like the brass family, the woodwind family, the percussion family, the string family, and the voice family. Now, each of those have instruments within themselves, like brass. You over here you have a trumpet, and over here you have a trombone. They sound different from one another. They have a different distinctive sound. They have a different tone color, even though they're in the brass family. They're both going to have similar characteristics, but not everything is identical. They're going to have varying characteristics as well. Whereas opposed, if you compare like a trumpet to a violin, those are two almost completely different timbres. But you compare a violin to a cello, well, now they're going to be more similar in timbre because they belong to the same instrument family. Okay, so here's a picture of those instrument families. This is just a good graphic of a symphony orchestra, 88 musicians typically here. So here over in the bottom left, those are our violins, both first and second violin. They're usually more than that. Over here, kind of in the middle, making this L shape right above the conductor, those are the violas. So viola is a slightly lower version of the violin, where the violin is playing more of the soprano notes. The viola is playing more of the alto notes. Then over here to the right of the violas, we have the cellos, which play more of the tenor notes. Okay. And then over to the far right, still in the string section, because that's what we're talking about, are the basses, of course, playing the bass baritone notes. So we're kind of relating to those to choir, and how if I were to put a violin in the choir for some reason, they would be probably playing with the sopranos, and all the way down. Over here, up right here in the dead center of the picture, we have the woodwind family. We have flutes, piccolos, bassoon. We have clarinets. Those are oboes right there. And then to the far left of the instrument family, that's an English horn. So that is the woodwind family. Okay, and some of these are single reed, like the clarinet. And then there are double reeds, like the bassoon, the oboe, and the English horn. Those are called double reed instruments. Okay, but they're all part of the woodwind family. So since they're part of the woodwind family, they all share similar characteristics in timbre, but they have some variation within themselves, within the family. Here's the brass family. We'll start out here with the French horn, or what is just called horn, because it is not a French invention, it's a German invention. So they call it horn nowadays. But if you say French horn, I'm not gonna freak out on you or tell you you're wrong, because that is the common kind of term for it. So here are the trumpets, here are trombones, and here are here's the tuba. So the tuba working down, trumpet, the highest voice, which is the soprano voice. The French horn is more of the alto voice. Trombone, more of that tenor voice. And the tuba is, of course, the bass baritone voice. In the back here, we have percussion with timpani, bass drums, xylophones, membranophone, all of those sort of percussion instruments. There's a triangle, which is auxiliary percussion. One that I did not mention in the string family should have is the harp. That is part of the string family as well. So here we go. Oh, this is a cool little video that I just found recently on timbre. It's a really great description from Berklee Music Online, which is a great institution. And just go ahead and enjoy this. They've got some really nice insight here. Ooh, here we go.
Timbre. Another word for timbre is tone. Timbre is the distinguishing characteristic that differentiates one sound from another, despite the fact that they might be playing the same frequency with the same amplitude.
So same pitch.
When we're describing a sound's timbre, we use words like sharp, round, reedy, brassy, or bright to describe them.
Bright, like singing through the mask.
Timbre to flavor. Think of apples. They're a type of fruit that has a typical shape, color, and flavor, But inside the category of apples, there's a huge amount of variation. Some apples are very sweet, while others are more sour. Some are red, while others are green. They're all still apples, but each one with a distinct characteristic. Red Delicious is different from Macintosh, is different from Gala, is different from Honeycrisp. Even when
Honeycrisp.
describing one type, there might be variations from apple to apple. Same thing goes for sound sources. One category of timbre we use quite often is strings. Inside of the string family, we have violins, violas, cellos, and double basses. They have similar timbres and tones in some ways, but each one is distinct. When comparing two different violins, one might have a very bright sound while the other is more muted and dark. Even when playing one violin, we can produce different timbres by bowing a different way.
Yeah, Berkeley School there has a lot of cool things. Oh no, it exited me out. Okay, we're gonna have to like fly through, and that's my presentation. Just kidding. There we go. So that is instrumentation. We talked about texture, harmonic texture, rhythmic texture, the density, the thickness of the instruments, and timbre, the distinctive color, the distinctive sound of every instrument. And she even said in her video that you might take one violin and another violin, and they have a slightly different timbre, and that is common. You might even take one violin and the way you bow or the way you angle your bow or whatever can actually change the timbre a little bit. So voices, this is really important to know. Voices have all different timbres. Everyone is made with a special, unique voice. And so one way that I've been taught to categorize voices is by comparing them to instruments. I have friends who are really brassy, forward tones, and then I have friends who are really fluty and light. I have friends who have nice string tones, and then I have friends who are foghorns, right? So there are people. Everyone has a different voice, and most people are a mixture of something. My one of my choral teachers when I was in college told me that I was like 80% string, 20% flute. And I'll never forget that. I was like, that is wonderful. And that is just my vocal timbre. And everybody has a unique vocal timbre. He was a master at being able to decipher and discern those things. I've learned a little bit. I'd like to do that a little bit. I actually use actual colors. I say your vocal color is like a watermelon red. And that's just something that I've kind of learned and used over the years. So here we go. Other factors of music. So these are things that are found in music, but might not be in everything, but are important to talk about because they do appear in a lot of things, right? And so some of these things, people would argue that is an element of music, especially, I hear people who are not music people who would say that should be an element. Well, we're going to talk about it, but so first is expression, and how we express music may not be exactly how we think we would. So in expression, I'm going to use dynamics and dynamic gradation. So how loud pitches are, how loud something is, how soft something is, and dynamic in volume level. And then gradation, gradual growth and decline of those dynamics. Phrasing, dynamics probably within the category of pitch if we decided to put it there. Okay. So next is phrasing. So how do we phrase shape a section? How do we go from here to there and connect, and when do we add stress to certain syllables, things like that. That's musical expression. It might not be emotional expression, but it is musical expression. Length of the song, a 2-minute song feels different than a 15-minute song. That's a factor. I wouldn't call it an element, but you could tie it into structure. Key signature, that's another factor. There are certain composers, actually all composers, when they go to compose a piece, they might try to write it for B flat major, and they don't like it in B flat major. Then they move it up to B major, which is just a half step up in key, but it changes the whole thing. So that is certainly a character. but they wanted to do B flat because B flat's an easier key signature than B, at least for instruments. Okay. Next is context and storytelling. This is where a lot of like non-music people try to talk to me about music, like, oh, emotions. What about emotion? It's an element. No, it's not. It's a factor, because not all music has emotions. Not all music is meant to drag that part out of people. It's certainly a factor, and it's certainly in music, and it's certainly an important factor of music, but I would not classify it as an element. It is a factor. So context and storytelling, that would include the text and the lyrics. Text more in our world of choral music making, lyrics more in kind of the pop idiom, and then emotions. I do think it's a factor. I think it's important in music, but I don't call it an element. So venue acoustics, when I'm programming songs for the choirs to sing, I'm thinking about where are we performing it? What is the venue? What are the acoustic likes in that venue? What is my audience? Would they be receptive of it? Would they learn from it? Would they be enriched by the experience? So that's kind of all goes into the factors of not just writing music, but also programming, which is picking music out for concerts. Okay, many more. That's just kind of the tip of the iceberg of the factors of music. There's a lot of little things that go into it, and that's the beauty of music making, is that it's all about nuance and all about the details. So that is it. We're done learning about I'm done presenting about the elements of music. Of course, we'll never be done learning about it, but I've got a lot of things to add throughout the years. Like I said, next year's Colevuxian Men's Choir, we're doing this in the first month. And I'm really excited to do it because I think it's going to be good for the program, good for all the students. Now, to talk a little bit about what we're going to do with this particular thing. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to, I'm going to pass out a study guide, just kind of a PDF, or I might even do like a practice quiz where I send out a Google form and you can go ahead and fill that out and then submit it and see how you do. And then the actual quiz will be like next week. So we're looking at, if I had a calendar, what's today, the 9th. So start looking at like the 15th is when we might start that. So, so plan for that, study for that, and we'll get it done. So let me know if you have any questions. I'm here to help, and I will see y'all later. Bye.